Episode 60, if you can believe that, of Unentitled Sports is live. Huge milestone episode for us and huge news to break. I'm sure you guys, this is the first you're hearing of this. So Unentitled Sports is proud to break the news that Luka Doncic has been traded to the Los Angeles Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis, some draft capital, and some bench players. The Utah Jazz were involved as well to make it a 3-team trade just to make it all work from a checkboxes standpoint. All you really need to know is that Luka Doncic has been swapped for Anthony Davis, and this is, there are so many words that can be used to describe this trade. I don't even know where to start, Lucas. What kind of emotions, what kind of words would you use to describe this trade?
Yeah, this trade, I think we talked about this before, but we came to the agreement that this trade is probably the biggest trade in NBA history, at least in terms of the most valuable asset being traded here. There's been other, transactions that have happened in NBA history that may have been more impactful or more shocking, like LeBron signing with the Miami Heat. That's probably the number one most impactful moment or transaction happening. After that being Kevin Durant signing with the Warriors. That was huge. Everybody remembers July 4th, 2016 when that went down. Beyond that, this might be the most shocking transaction that we've seen. And from a trade standpoint, you just don't see stuff like this happen. A player who is currently, I would say, the third best player in the league. Some people would say he's the second best player in the league. At the age of 25, almost entering his peak of his career, you just never see somebody like that get traded. So it's super unusual, and I think it caught all of us off guard. What was your initial reaction? How did you feel when you first read that trade, and when did you first realize it was true?
Complete shock and disbelief. That's probably the best way to summarily describe how I felt. My story is, when this happened last night, I was at Disneyland and my phone was dead. So I did not hear about this as it was happening, which honestly, I'm okay with, because that would have distracted me for the remaining however long I was at Disneyland. But so when I get home and, I plug my phone in, go to the bathroom, whatever, come back and my phone is revived. And before, when your phone dies, those ESPN notifications that you missed, they eventually come rolling in, but it takes a couple minutes. And so while that hadn't happened yet, I just open up Twitter, because I'm a big Twitter guy now, and I see OMG Luka Doncic, OMG Anthony Davis, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm like, whoa, what? Can't believe, wait, what happened? And then I open Instagram, and the first thing I see was the All Sports News post, Lakers trade for Luka Doncic, whatever, and I immediately understood, the gravity of this trade. I knew this was like a once in a decade, maybe even once in a generation kind of thing. It was like a where were you when Luka Doncic got traded to the Lakers kind of thing. Completely blew my mind. And like I said earlier, it's tough to find words to describe this trade. It's big, it's impactful, it's shocking. It's mind-blowing. There's so many things, so many measures that this trade ranks number one in. It's insane. And I feel like, I'm not going to say that this is the most insane thing that's ever happened in sports ever. I'm not going to say that. But in terms of transactions and in modern sports history, maybe from 1980, 1990, 2000s, whatever, however you want to define modern, I feel like this is one of the biggest trades, not just in NBA history, but modern sports history. Because like I said, there were times, Babe Ruth got traded from the Yankees to the Red Sox. That was over 100 years ago. Kareem has been traded before. Different sport, but Wayne Gretzky was traded from the Oilers in the peak of his career to the Kings after he had already won championships, all that sort of thing. But in modern sports history, since sports has become this, billion-dollar industry, and since sports has become what we recognize it as today, if that's how you define modern, I think this is the biggest trade in modern sports history.
But not only was this trade massive, it was also completely lopsided and completely ridiculous.
It was insane.
It is one of those very rare times when you have the experts, the NBA experts, the dumbest people you meet on the street, and just the casual watchers all agreeing that this trade is a bad deal for the Dallas Mavericks here.
And this trade was too dumb even for Bleacher Report. Bleacher Report wasn't reporting on any ridiculous trades like this. And I want to say this is something that you'd only see in 2K. But this trade seems too dumb even for 2K. Do you think you would see this trade on 2K?
There's so much that's shocking about this. But the reason why it's really shocking, just to lay it out there, is that this deal was essentially brought, to the table by Nico Harrison, the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, as, his idea. He wanted to move on from Luka Doncic.
Trade.
And specifically, he wanted Anthony Davis. So he approached Rob Pelinka, the general manager of the Lakers, to get this deal done, rather than shopping Luka to the highest bidder. Because, of course, if you shopped Luka to the highest bidder, you would have gotten a much bigger haul than Anthony Davis in a first-round pick and Max Christie. But that didn't happen. It was a very specific orchestrated trade that sent Luka Doncic to the Lakers. So this is everybody, questioning why, and why also this only the 2029 first-round pick.
It's not that the Mavs GM traded away Luka. He traded for AD and traded Luka away to make that happen. That's absurd. That's the most ridiculous thing. This might be the most ridiculous thing we've ever talked about on this podcast. It's
not only that. Not only did he went specifically for Anthony Davis. There was much more on the table that the Lakers could have offered that would make this deal much more fair in the eyes of the public and the experts. Right? You have Austin Reeves, you have Dalton Connect, you have Bronny, just kidding. You have the 2031 first round draft pick that they could have also thrown in. But no, this trade was pretty bare bones, essentially. When normally we see all these trades happen, we have a pick swap in 2068, that there are two to three more pick swaps that go along with this trade. But this is a bare bones deal, and it has everybody in shock.
When a player of even all-star caliber gets traded, you see anywhere from 3 to 5 first-round draft picks getting moved, and a whole bevy of role players and players on expiring contracts and pick swaps to make it all work. And yeah, like you said, this trade doesn't have that. It's pretty simple. There were some extremely insignificant pieces like the Jazz getting involved, but really all you need to know is Anthony Davis, some role players, and 1 first-round pick for Luka Doncic. It's insane. It's like you said, I feel like it's one of the biggest trades in NBA history. And as far as transactions go, like you said, I think this is just a hair below LeBron signing with Miami, Cleveland, LA in free agency when he did that, and when KD came to the Warriors. But I feel pretty confident in saying that this is the biggest trade in NBA modern history, because I did do some research that I would like to share. And I've compiled what I believe are the biggest trades in the NBA. And again, every time I say biggest, feel free to interpret that word however you want. But biggest in air quotes, biggest trade in NBA history. Modern NBA history since 2000. I've done my research, compiled the list, and I feel like this Luka trade is bigger than all of them. You've got Kevin Durant to Phoenix. This trade is bigger. James Harden to Brooklyn. This trade is bigger. Russell Westbrook to Houston. This trade is bigger. Damian Lillard to Milwaukee. This trade is bigger. Kawhi to Toronto, where Kawhi won a championship for them. I think this trade is bigger. Carmelo Anthony to the New York Knicks. I think this trade is bigger. Anthony Davis to the Lakers. I think this trade is bigger. And Shaquille O'Neal to the Miami Heat. I think this trade is bigger. I think, I've rattled off the biggest trades. If listeners, feel free to hit up the comment section if you think there's a trade I missed that this Luka trade isn't bigger than, and I challenge you to do that. I don't think you can.
James Wiseman to the Portland Trailblazers for 2 second-round picks. That's the only one that I think you left off of the list there. But yeah, I would have to agree. It's definitely the biggest trade in modern NBA history, and I like the way that you just rattled that off there.
Another thing to kind of consider on top of all that, in addition to this being a midseason trade, not only is this, probably the biggest trade in NBA modern history or modern NBA history, but it happened midseason, not even in the offseason. And something, so unique and so different about this trade, especially in today's day and age, it wasn't player driven. Not only did LeBron not push for this, he didn't even sign off on it. He didn't even know that this was happening. Luka, like everyone's first, we'll get more into this later, but everyone's first instinct was like, oh my gosh, the only way that this could have happened is if Luka wanted it to happen. Luka didn't request to leave. He didn't expect to get moved. He was completely blindsided by this, as was Anthony Davis. He didn't expect to be traded at all. Nobody expected this. This was, in no way, shape, or form player-driven, which it feels like that's the only reason anyone ever gets traded anymore anyways. And so not only was it not at all player-driven, but it was totally quiet, which is, again, in today's day and age, incredible. So many times in the NBA, in order for anything to happen, it needs to be a rumor for 2 weeks. Everyone needs to know about it. And by the time it actually happens, people already come to expect it.
And that was genius on Rob Pelinka's part, because if anybody had heard about this deal outside of Nico Harrison and his wife, they would have said, Nico, what are you doing? Stop. Yeah, right. Don't do it.
Or if another team heard about this deal, they would have actually submitted a better offer for Luka Doncic.
Exactly. Yes. The best thing that could have possibly happened for the Mavericks would have been this getting out. And Nico Harrison, I watched a video of him on ESPN saying, thank you, Rob Pelinka, for not letting this get out. And Rob Pelinka's there like,
no, it was my pleasure.
People are wondering, why did this happen? And I had a couple reasons that initially came to my mind as to what was going on, and I think that most people had the same thought process. Most of these reasons have been at least told that they were incorrect, right? We heard from Nico Harrison that this deal was done for certain reasons, but the number one reason, right, you mentioned it, was that Luka Doncic must have asked out. He must have said not only that he wasn't going to sign with the Mavericks, but he wasn't going to sign with anybody but the Lakers, because otherwise you would obviously shop him around the league and get the best deal for him. He would have to have said, you can trade me to these other teams, but I'm going to tell them specifically, I will not re-sign with you after 2026 when my contract is up. I will only re-sign with the Lakers, which would drive his value very much down, essentially cornering them into making a deal with specifically the Lakers. Otherwise, why would you just offer the best, the third best player, maybe the third most valuable player in the league to one specific team? Doesn't make any sense. But we found out that this trade was offered by the Mavericks, by Nico Harrison.
It was done proactively.
His idea.
It was proactive and not reactive
on their end, which takes that out of the equation. But it takes away the most obvious answer to why this all happened. The second reason why people would assume that this maybe is happening is Luka Doncic might be far more injured than we had expected. He's been out since Christmas, and he's expected to come back, I think, at the end of this month. It's February right now, February 2nd. And, if this is actually a far more serious injury that we don't even know about, if Luka Doncic is bound to be out for the rest of this year, then, maybe this trade makes a lot more sense. But there's a couple wrenches you can throw into that. Number one being that both teams are going to have physicals for their players before this trade actually officially goes through. So if there's something horrible that's happening, the Lakers will know about it. Maybe the Lakers are going to find out about it and still not say anything because it's still a good deal. If you have
even if he is missing the rest of the year,
he's still worth more.
It's still a great trade. Yeah.
It's still a great trade. So maybe we're going to find that out. Luka Doncic just sits out for the rest of this year, and people still think that Rob Pelinka pulled off the deal of the century, which he still probably did in that situation. But I don't know if that's true.
You don't trade away Luka Doncic for health-related reasons and then go get Anthony Davis.
Right.
It's not like Anthony Davis is the
guy out there.
It's not like he's the spitting image of health in the NBA either.
I would argue his name is Street Clothes.
Yeah, no, it's like I would argue he has a worse and more concerning injury history than Luka Doncic. So it's like if health really was health couldn't have been the reason, because otherwise they wouldn't have traded for Anthony Davis. Obviously Luka Doncic isn't some sort of NBA Iron Man who's known for not missing games, but he's not known for being injury prone either. And now you traded for someone who's 6 years older, worse, and is known for being injury prone. So this whole conspiracy that Luka's secretly has a Derrick Rose type of injury, I'm not believing that, because if it was true, then you wouldn't go trade for Anthony Davis.
I completely agree. And that's just another thing that doesn't make any sense about this. Why is this happening? It's probably not because of a serious injury. And even if you're concerned about his injury history and his lack of work ethic, him being 270 pounds, which came out recently, it doesn't matter. You still don't move on from him for that little of a deal. Or you just shop him because somebody in the league is going to pay the top price for Luka Doncic, even if this information came out. There's been players that kind of information has come out and somebody's willing to take a risk on them. Look how many times Kyrie Irving's been traded to a team. James Harden, like they have bad things that have come out about them, and then people are still willing to pay top dollar.
Right.
For
There aren't people that run that you don't run out of people who will believe in them.
There's 30 teams in the league right now, and somebody's willing to pay the deal. So that left more of a conspiracy theory on the table for our third option, as to why this is happening, and maybe it's because Luka Doncic is we're about to hear about a huge scandal that involves Luka Doncic. And the Dallas Mavericks organization has heard about this already, before the rest of the public, and they decided, let's cash out as soon as we possibly can. Let's not dilly-dally. Let's get the deal, the first deal that comes to the table, and get rid of him, because this huge information is all going to drop, and Luka Doncic is not going to be in the NBA in 2 years after this because of this whole scandal. And that's probably unlikely as well. But it would make sense. It would make sense.
No, and it's like, truthfully, I'm not buying that. But, raising that point, we're raising that point just to kind of prove a point, in that there are no clear and obvious explanations for this. Like this trade raises so many questions and sort of allows for conspiracy theorists to run wild with this, because this trade doesn't make any sense in basketball terms. So it's like there has to be something else going on outside of what we know.
Yes, and, I do have an explanation for this. You came to the right place, listeners of Unentitled Sports. I have a theory. I don't think it's very solid, but it does kind of explain what's happening, and it does, it's sort of a Brian Windhorst galaxy brain mixed with, a social network entrepreneurial mindset, okay? That's kind of where I'm coming from here. But if you're ready for it, I'm happy to give it to you.
Shoot.
Okay. Here's my thought. NBA ratings are down this season. They're down 20, 25%, significantly down. The NFL has continued to skyrocket. It's like they're kind of taking more of the market now. And it was sort of expected a couple of years ago that was going to be the opposite. As the NBA kept climbing up in the ratings, and people kept paying more and more attention, it felt like America's sport will probably eventually be the NBA. Why was the NBA so popular? It was because of these superstars that they had. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, these players that were all-time level players playing at their peak and competing for championship after championship. I think you can specifically credit Steph Curry in a lot of ways for growing the game in the way that it had. Now, people are concerned about too many three-point shots being taken, all-star players being held out, and there's serious conversations going on about shortening the season, shortening games that Adam Silver mentioned, potentially moving it down to 10-minute quarters. These are real conversations because there is a problem right now in the NBA.
I think part of the reason that, ratings are going down as we transition away from the Steph, LeBron, and KD era, you look at the top 5 players in the NBA, none of them are American. 4 out of those 5 are non-native English speakers, and they all play in smaller markets like Milwaukee and Oklahoma City and Denver and Philadelphia and up until yesterday, Dallas.
He's making my point. Let's go. Okay. Let me run from that.
Take it and run.
So yes, there is a problem with superstars in the NBA right now. You buy an NBA franchise. If you bought an NBA franchise 20 years ago, the Warriors sold for however many $100 million they did. They draft Steph Curry and they're worth $9 billion. But guess what? The Warriors draft Steph Curry, and the Charlotte Hornets go from $300 million to $4 billion. The Charlotte Hornets, who have been asked the entire time, who have not
they didn't do anything.
Done a single thing. They have not done anything. Their evaluation 10x's because a rising tide raises all boats. Okay? So what is going on right now with the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic? If the Dallas Mavericks don't win a championship with Luka Doncic and the NBA ratings are continuing to go down, their overall evaluation as a franchise might go down. They buy the team for it to increase its value as a franchise. If Luka Doncic is a Laker, the next 10 years of the NBA, he is the face of the league, and the league continues to prosper, right? If Luka is in LA, Luka as a Laker is worth so much more to the NBA than Luka as a Maverick.
Maybe even the Mavericks included.
Yes, so maybe. Even to the Mavericks, it makes more sense financially for Luka Doncic to be a Laker. Maybe they are falling on their sword. They're saying, we don't think we were going to win a championship. And if we weren't going to win a championship with Luka, then our overall evaluation as a franchise would be better served. It would be better served to our overall evaluation as a franchise if the NBA was better served overall. So let's send Luka Doncic to the Lakers and, take the bullet that everybody else wants us to take. Be the change that you want to see in the world and make the NBA a better product. So specifically and on purpose, take a bad trade. Send Luka to the Lakers and everybody prospers. That's my crazy theory. That's probably not real.
Yeah.
But
very impressive.
Financially, it might make sense. If NBA franchises are actually not that profitable. I looked it up. Per year, they make like $100 million. Like I think on average, they profit around $100 million, which is a lot of money. But it's
a thin profit margin for how much, for how much your money you're working with.
Right. Yeah. And the real money is made when you sell the team eventually, right? You buy it at a certain number, and then eventually once it goes up, you sell it and you made a couple $1 billion. That's the real money. So on top of that, and we haven't mentioned this yet, but Luka Doncic is due for a 5-year supermax. He was due for a $365 million deal over 5 years. That obviously cuts into your high profits. Your profits that are around $100 million. They're going to be lower when you're playing. You're going to be paying a high luxury tax, most likely, if you want to field a competitive team around Luka Doncic with that huge contract. So these kind of all are playing into the financial aspect of this trade that I think would make the most sense to me, and it does make the most sense to me as to why they would do this, kind of in an Oakland A's style, plus a little bit more of galaxy brain thinking here. Maybe in the long run, this is actually going to be a positive thing for the ownership, just for the ownership, just for their bottom line, the amount of money that they have in their pocket. It sucks for the fans. There's no question about that.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't even think there's a point in starting that conversation, just because how obvious it is and how long it could take us to prove a point that's completely obvious. But that's like, Lucas, I'm very impressed with that tangent you just went on. Like it's very very interesting. Ultimately, I don't think that's why this trade happened. But nonetheless, you brought up some really good and interesting points. It's like,
I mean, it's Mavericks, that, or they thought AD was better than Luka.
Right.
It's like, if you open your fucking
neither of those
eyes,
make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
No, and it's like, you're right. Like, Dallas might stand more to gain financially by Luka playing in LA than Luka playing in Dallas, which is insane to think about. But it's where we're at this point.
It might save the league. I'm so much more interested. I'm going to watch the next Laker, Luka Doncic, LeBron James game. Of course I am. And then, for the next 10 years after LeBron James, you now have the Lakers that are going to be in contention, probably for a long, long time. They're not going to be bad. And that's so good for the league if the Lakers are good.
Right. Well, and another interesting point is, like, LeBron, maybe for the first time in his career, is no longer the centerpiece of the franchise he's on. LeBron is not the priority in LA right now. He is the priority, Luka is the priority in LA. And I was thinking about this, it's like they did this without LeBron signing off on it. And, there are reports that are coming around that, like, LeBron is cool with this and he understands and he still wants to be a Laker and all that. But let's say LeBron reacted adversely to it. The Lakers could have gone, you know what? If you don't like it, tough shit. We just got Luka Doncic, who is the most valuable trade asset in the NBA, and if you don't like it, you're not the priority anymore. Luka Doncic is. We are building this team around Luka Doncic, and if you want to be a part of that, you're welcome to stay, but if you don't like it, that's too bad for you, because we're doing what's best for a franchise, and that is putting our eggs in Luka Doncic's basket.
it's the first time that the Lakers have made a serious move in the last 7 years or however long it's been, that it didn't involve Anthony Davis and LeBron James, and it didn't surround making this team a better team around Anthony Davis and LeBron James. They didn't consult Anthony Davis or LeBron James, which is pretty crazy. And it kind of begs the question: are there any other moves that are going to be made surrounding this Lakers team? I'm sure that there are. There's a big question mark of are LeBron James and Luka Doncic going to play well together? They play a very similar style of game. Like if there's one player that you would compare Luka Doncic to, it's probably a 40-year-old LeBron James. So I have another thought about this, and this probably is the only time that it would maybe make sense for the Warriors to aggressively pursue LeBron James. I don't think that this is likely to happen, but this is the time when you call up Rod Pelinka and you say, hey, how does Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, Andrew Wiggins, and 3 first-round picks sound for LeBron James? Because, they're finally making moves that don't, go by clutch sports first. LeBron may be okay with the deal because now everything's kind of blown up and Anthony Davis is not going to be on the team, and he might not be as happy about working with Luka Doncic. And the Lakers, as a franchise, they might do better with, basketball speaking. They might be a better basketball team if they don't have LeBron James and Luka Doncic on the court at the same time. So this kind of opens up this potential
if they can go
window.
get some building blocks to put alongside Luka for the next, it's like they're thinking long term with Luka. It's like there's no reason to believe that Luka won't be a Laker for the next 10 years. And if you're thinking with that in mind, for the next 10 years, would you rather have LeBron James or Kuminga and Podziemski and Trace Jackson-Davis and Moses Moody and Gary Payton and Andrew Wiggins
Anybody
and
else.
every Warriors first-round draft pick? Yeah, really just take them all,
Yeah. I mean, the Warriors, we talked about this with Larry Beal, but the Warriors, their second timeline doesn't exist. It's really the offseason that we're planning on having this offseason to go and get somebody who actually makes a difference. And I think that LeBron does make a difference. I think a LeBron, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green-led team can be a title contender, and we have to be content with the fact that after they leave, we're going to be bad. So it makes sense for the Warriors, and now it is kind of starting to make a little bit of sense for the Lakers too. So it might happen. It might not. Probably won't.
I agree. It probably won't happen, but it sure is likelier now than it was 24 hours ago. This is kind of my, I have thought about it a lot, as you can tell, as I'm sure a lot of you have. And this is what I'm believing. This is my best explanation for why Dallas would trade, a top 5 player in the NBA, a tier 1 player in the NBA, and arguably the most valuable trade asset in the NBA. I think it's a combination of these two things. One, Dallas's new ownership is cheap. Whoever bought the majority shares of the team from Mark Cuban and is now, the owner and the governor and whatever the title is, whoever's in charge of that team now, doesn't want to pay Luka, $70 million a year, because that's a lot of money. And unfortunately, some sports owners get into the business and then don't want to spend money, which seems like kind of the antithesis of the whole thing, but I digress. And so that's one thing. And then another factor or possible factor is Dallas just doesn't believe in Luka, which seems insane. But they don't believe in him because of his injury history, which isn't that bad. Teams have believed in players with way worse injury history. See Anthony Davis. And so they either don't believe in him because of his injury history or his weight issues, which I think is total bullshit. Because if I have a player who's averaging a 30-point triple-double and taking my otherwise pretty mid team to the NBA Finals, I let him eat whatever the fuck he wants. They either don't they don't believe in his work ethic and conditioning and dieting and weight management, or maybe they think he's, a team cancer and a bad leader and a locker room destroyer. But I don't believe that either, because if that were the case, I feel like we would know. I feel like it would either A, be reported on, or B, we'd be able to see it with our own eyes with how he interacts with his teammates and coaches in public, on the court. There's nothing we've seen that would suggest that. But it's like we've exhausted all our other options. And I feel like those are kind of, the only two things left before we start getting into these, conspiracies, which they sound they are crazy, but it's like, what's left other than crazy?
It is crazy. The whole situation that's happening right now is pretty crazy. So just to look forward to, the future of these teams, like what does it look like for the Mavericks and the Lakers? I think, we talked a little bit about the Lakers potentially moving on from LeBron James. That's one option for them. I think right now as a team, they're better than they were. But I still don't think that they're a championship team. Things take time to mesh, and the tale will be told based on how well LeBron and Luka can mesh and how well Kyrie and Anthony Davis can mesh. If Kyrie and Anthony Davis go out and win a championship this year, all is forgiven for
Right.
Nico Harrison. And I think that is a possibility.
He looks like, and it is possible, and he looks like the smartest GM to ever grace the earth. But
Yeah.
I mean, here's
Right now,
the
he
fact.
looks really dumb.
Yeah, which is not the case right now. But here's the fact of the matter. Going forward, for every season in which they are both healthy, Luka Doncic is going to be better than Anthony Davis. Luka Doncic is better than Anthony Davis right now, and he is going to be better than Anthony Davis for every single season that they are both healthy until Anthony Davis retires and Luka Doncic is going to play 10 more years of basketball. The Mavericks GM was trying to brand this as some sort of win now, get better in the present type of trade. That's total bullshit. Not only is Luka Doncic going to be a better player than Anthony Davis in the future, and not only do the Lakers win this trade in the future, they win this trade in the present tense. They win this trade right now. The Lakers are now a better team, and the Mavericks are a worse team because Luka Doncic right now is a better player than Anthony Davis. So I'm not buying everything that the Mavs GM said about this being a win now, make this team better right now kind of trade. I'm not buying that. I don't really even think he meant that either.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% correct about that, and it makes everything look wild. There is, I do have an affinity for a dynamic scoring point guard along with a defensive-minded big man. I think that always looks great, but we've seen it happen with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. We've seen even John Stockton and Karl Malone, they didn't win a championship. It always looks great, just the height difference. Like some guy who's 6'2" and some guy who's 7'1", you're like, and these guys are both superstars. Like they have to work super well together. I'm excited to see if they do, and Klay Thompson, is a piece in all this that I'm rooting for. I hope this works out better for the Mavericks than it does the Lakers.
Right, and at the end of the day, Anthony Davis finally got what he wanted out of all this. He can finally play the four now.
But it's all looking really suspicious right now, and it's all not looking great for the Mavericks. Aiden Morrill, our good friend who is a Mavericks fan, refused to comment. He refused to comment on the situation. I called him last night. He didn't answer, and your phone was dead too. But it's very shocking. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you've heard all about it. But if you want to talk more about it, there will be much more conversation to be had about this trade and
this is a developing story.
The fallout from this deal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I'm just still I still just can't get over how quietly this all happened because, in today's day and age, by the time anything happens nowadays, everyone already knows about it before it even happens. And this came, out of nowhere as out of nowhere gets. So not only is there that component to it, but it wasn't player driven, and just the sheer magnitude of it makes it one of the most newsworthy and impactful NBA trades of all time.
100%. Well said, Ryan. I think that is going to do it for episode 60 of Unentitled Sports. Thank you for listening. Very happy to be into the 60s now. We will hopefully hit 100. That's kind of the next big, I guess 75 will be a big milestone. And then, 100 after that. It's all up from here. And I think this was a good episode and really good content to talk about. So if there's 40 more trades of this caliber,
we'll be at episode 100 in no time.
Yes. But I think that's going to do it. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.